Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend Alexander Carr, Sydney-sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week we talk about Alex's investment ideas and the ASX share market game, CBS buying the Ten network, discrimination in the tech world, and Parkinson's law. So, Alex, what's this about your investment ideas and the ASX share market trading game? I assume that's back on for a new season.
It is indeed back on for a new season, which I've already started, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster. My share portfolio has fluctuated by about $3,000, kind of up and down so far, due to a couple of reasons, because the market's a bit turbulent at the moment with all the North Korea stuff that's happening. Gets investors a bit scared of going in, so everyone pulls out and goes into safe things like gold. Also because I'm not a magnificent trader. I bought some shares in the game, obviously, in the Nine network, just before the announcement was made that CBS were going to purchase Network 10 and basically pump a whole lot of cash into it and try and take over the Australian television network market. So basically, Nine Entertainment shares have gone down, so as of Seven Networks as well. And Southern Cross Media, which is Channel 10, have not really gone up though, because basically the deal is going to take 10 off the share market and just screw over all the shareholders, essentially, as if they haven't been screwed over enough already. Because all of the entertainment networks, their share prices have just been going steadily downhill. What was $100 million industry before has become probably just a multi-million-dollar industry. Whoa, sorry. Whew. Didn't even know that was my ringtone.
What was that?
It was my phone.
It is an interesting move by CBS. Apparently they think the Australian programs, or like Australian-made programs, are actually doing quite well in Australia and maybe even doing somewhat well abroad, which is maybe one of the reasons why they decided to buy into the market.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know Neighbours does very well overseas, and that's the worst Australian TV show there is, so
yes,
maybe the other stuff does even better.
I didn't expect it at all. I don't know if other players in the industry knew that this sort of thing was possible, but I really didn't think, like, Ten has been struggling for such a long time. I wasn't sure they were going to find any buyer, really, except for maybe some of the rich Australian moguls. But of course, with the Packers couldn't buy it because of the 2 out of 3 rule. I mean, the Murdochs.
Well, yes. I remember seeing about seeing the return on investment that I think the Murdochs, who own some of Channel 7, like a decent amount of Channel 7 got, and basically they spent about $100 million on their total investment, and currently they own about $10 million worth of shares. Like, the share price has dropped that much. And what they were looking at doing with Southern Cross Media is there was another deal put on the table by a couple of big investors where I think they put their major shareholding back on the market at a certain price, and if the market can meet that price, then they'll sell out, and the company, which is currently in receivership, will then and they'll use that to raise capital. But I like, for whatever reason, the company that the receivership company, the company that's managing Network 10 now, refused the offer. I assume it's because the CBS offer's come through and it's much better. But I know the investors in Network 10 weren't particularly happy about it.
I wonder if that means that Australians will have better access to CBS content.
Well, that was the question, I think, and I'm not actually sure what's going to happen with it. But
No, I don't think
they will.
they've said what is going to happen with that, but you would think that there's a possibility now that that could improve. Or there might be sort of a direct channel that you could get these things through as opposed to having to go through Foxtel or even Netflix.
Yeah. Look, it might be the case. I mean, not that it really matters for me in any way, because I don't watch TV.
No, well, it is a dying medium, that's for sure, which is another reason why I'm surprised a big player came in and bought it up. I thought it was just going to die, to be honest.
You know, I think the thing is that TV still holds a lot of power in the sense that people will still turn it on and watch the news. And although it might not have been the huge industry it was, it still has that power. I mean, like it's like radio; it will probably still continue on for a while.
Oh no, it's not going to die overnight. But 10 has always had a fairly small share of the market compared to 7 and 9, and I thought it might actually be better for all the players in the sense that if they just went away. But now they've got CBS's backing, they could end up being one of the big players as well.
Yeah, look, they could
in the remaining market.
Seems to me like they really missed it. All these TV shows, you know, they had the market and they could have just moved into different areas and gone into streaming sooner, and they might have been fine, but they didn't do it.
No,
I mean, 10 doesn't have a streaming site as far as I'm aware, and neither really does 7 or 9.
They do. They have a catch-up service. They have they have a catch-up service, and you can stream like what's currently on air through the internet.
But only some shows, as far as I'm aware.
Only some shows on the catch-up service, and no sport on the live streams.
Yes, exactly. I tried to stream some sport on the live streams and it didn't work, and it was very frustrating.
Yeah, but that's all tied up in other licensing deals with the various sports bodies, so that's not so much their fault.
Frustrates me, David. It's just ridiculous. They provide such poor service.
Yeah. Yes, and their apps and their websites aren't real great, but what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, I guess they're the ones who are going to suffer for it, aren't they? Okay, so David, we've both read this article which was published to The Cut by Ellen Powell, titled "This is How Sexism Works in Silicon Valley. My lawsuit failed, others won't." Now, from reading the article, I think it might have been an excerpt from some other writing she's done, perhaps about a book that she's published. Before I'd read this, I'd never heard of her. Had you ever heard of her before?
Well, only in the context of this whole case. It has come up in various tech websites that I've seen allude to this, and various podcasts have also mentioned this from time to time.
Yeah.
Around the broader discussion of probably women in the tech industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, quite an unpleasant article in a lot of ways. Ellen Powell is obviously quite a strong woman, but she basically, through just working and trying to achieve a position of power and get ahead in a venture capitalist firm, she experienced quite a lot of sexual harassment from her colleagues who were also venture capitalists, and she basically it seems that she basically hit the glass ceiling. And she wasn't happy with that, and because of the fact that she wasn't happy with that and the way that she was treated, she ended up getting pushed out of her company, and she shares with us some quite horrific stories. And then she ended up suing this company, this very, very wealthy company, in a very high profile court case.
Yes, Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers.
Yes, who were quite a large firm, from what I understand. Was it the fourth largest firm?
Yeah, and one of their founders is invested in Google and Amazon and on all these things before they became the juggernauts that we know today. So they've certainly had a decent track record as far as venture capitalist firms go.
Yes, exactly. But Yeah, and she had quite a high profile court case against them because of all these things, and as is the way, unfortunately, in America, she got quite heavily slandered through the press, and they ended up, I think, turning enough people against her that she ended up losing the court case.
Mm.
And yeah, it was actually all very confronting, all quite tragic as well. But it happens in Australia as well.
It certainly does. It certainly does. Even sort of on the pay front, in terms of being underpaid as a woman, I know there's been stories in the last couple of weeks in Australia that that's certainly the case in every industry, and in some cases up to I think about 30% less than men. Still in 2017, it's a bit tragic, really.
Yeah, I remember hearing in a company that I used to work at, which I won't name, but I remember hearing that women who were doing exactly the same thing were on about 20% less for no reason other than they were women.
Yeah, it's not right?
No, absolutely not.
And I don't understand why it's still happening, really. I know in this case, it seems like this particular firm was kind of a boys' club and probably still is, and they didn't have any sort of policies around sexual harassment and just behavior in the workplace before this incident came out. But it is horrifying to a certain degree that for every one of these stories that you hear, and they're not super uncommon, there's probably dozens, if not hundreds, that are just sort of swept under the rug.
Yeah, there are. No, absolutely. And I think being a woman in any corporate environment, you have to put up with a lot of it. My current company is pretty good. We have 2 women on our senior management team, which is 2 more than some. But having said that, our senior management team is still, I think, what is it? 1, 2. Trying to think of who we have actually. Actually, it might be a bit more of an even split. So we have 2 women and 2 men that I can think of.
Okay, well, yeah, that's not too bad. Although I suppose it's less about the numbers per se, although that is a direct metric that you can actually measure and hope to achieve better results at. It's probably more about giving everyone an equal opportunity to advance to whatever position they want to achieve in the long run.
Yeah.
And giving them equal pay and equal rights along the way, and being able to achieve those things in the same amount of time as their colleagues, and not just held back for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. And I know, but I like something this article kind of really says to me is that, these, when you kind of say that this company is a boys' club, which, I mean, obviously it was, but the fact of the matter is it's not legally acceptable to have a company like this in any way.
No, well, it's not. But I think, not that this is an excuse, but when you have a monoculture, of course that's going to breed a certain amount of discrimination. And so that's an extra reason why diversity is so good, because diversity breeds more diversity, I think. Yeah,
no, I would agree with that. It's just an unfortunate thing that it happens. What do you think we could do to stop it?
It's hard. It is hard because, at least in the tech industry, it's sort of a chicken and egg type scenario, because you don't have enough people, enough women and enough other sort of minorities coming through the system that they'll ever be sort of equal numbers currently. Because I know in my degree there was only a handful of women out of a class of like 200 doing engineering, and that makes it difficult to actually employ people to put them in the positions where it can affect change. And then because of that, you get stories like this, because they're underrepresented and they're dismissed by a lot of people. Why would young women want to voluntarily come into these careers?
That's a very good question.
If they're being treated like this. And so where does it actually start? I think it needs to just start everywhere. And anyone in a position of some authority even if it's not the highest authority that sees this type of behavior, that they do something about it. And they don't just turn a blind eye to it, I think. And to try to educate people. Because I don't necessarily think that the people that treat other people like this are inherently bad. Clearly their behavior is vastly inappropriate and shouldn't be tolerated in a workplace. But they might do it because they've gotten away with small things in the past and no one's pulled them up on it. And so they think that it's okay. You know, it's just sort of... it reaffirms on them that it's fine, and it's not. So it just needs to be a broader education of people. And, you know, like you and I think we feel the same about this sort of issue. And, you know, I think our workplaces are probably better than a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in a fairly privileged position, and we should use that where we can to affect some minor change. Major change if possible, but that's probably hard because this is a gradual process, I think. I mean, I think we're in a better position now than we ever have been because we're having these conversations. And in decades past, there was no conversation, but these things were still going on, right?
Yeah.
So, although that doesn't really help people in these situations right now, hopefully it will lead to the ultimate change and equality for all.
Okay. Well, that's actually an excellent point, David. I fully agree with everything you say.
I don't know. I don't think there is necessarily a quick fix. What do you think we could potentially do to drive it forward with more momentum?
Oh, look, I completely agree with you. There is no quick fix to this. I think that when you sit in the position of privilege, like we both do, I think you're right. It's just about acting and making sure that you are the one who says something if you see behaviour like this, and that you're able to recognise, which I think in most cases you and I would probably be able to do. I do know, much to my shame, that I don't always say something. Like, it's not. I don't think it's not about the really bad stuff, because I think the really bad stuff I would always say something about, but just the everyday small stuff. The kind of stuff that doesn't always, like, you know, you might see an older guy or something just saying something, and you just think, well, that's just his generation. That's just what they believe. That's just what they do. It's what he's done all his life. It's not really a good excuse for that kind of thing, is it?
No, it is hard, though, because you're probably not going to change his mind, and then so having any sort of conversation with that particular guy is possibly counterproductive in some ways. But maybe, and it's hard, but in a sort of a group situation, if someone makes a sexist joke or something, and then everyone just sort of laughs at it, and it just sort of perpetuates it. But then if you actually say, well, no, that's probably not really appropriate, then most of the other people are probably going to agree with you, and then they've learnt something, and then that's probably made the workplace better.
Yeah, okay.
If you do it in sort of a not too judgmental way, I think, because it's easy for people to get very defensive about things. Sort of call out the behaviour, not the person.
Okay. No, that's good advice.
It's a fine line to tread, but obviously this doesn't sort of impact us as much as the people that it is really affecting. But if we're not part of the solution, we're probably part of the problem.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. I would completely agree with that. And I think it is very easy to be part of the problem.
Another thing that potentially could help, although I don't know how it could be implemented, is maybe more transparency. It could certainly help with sort of the pay situation, which might go some way to resolving some other issues.
Yes. I don't know. It seems like just a really elaborate scam that we don't know what other people in our company are paid. Because there's no legal reason that you shouldn't know what somebody else is paid. And then it just helps companies cover the fact that not everyone is getting paid the same thing, even though you know you're not being paid the same as some people.
Yeah. And maybe it wouldn't even need to be like released to the public or anything.
Yeah.
And I know this is probably just going to create more red tape or something, but there could be a governmental body that is in charge of holding this information and then, enforcing some sort of equality across equivalent positions.
Well, yes, I don't know how you go with that one, to be honest. It sounds like a very difficult thing to manage and implement and make happen.
Well, businesses already report so many numbers to people. And if they're on the stock exchange and that, there's so many things that they need to report. You could just add it as another thing that has to be... Like, some people get bonuses in that. But when you have a pay gap of an equivalent position of as much as 30%, like there's clearly something fundamentally wrong there.
Yes. Yeah.
And companies shouldn't be able to get away with that. But they will continue to if there's no sort of reporting and no monitoring of this.
Okay.
I agree with you. I don't know how you could possibly get that system up and running. But if you had something, like I know there's a few European countries, isn't there, that is everyone's wage is reported in public.
I'm not actually sure about that. That's not something I've ever heard of, but I mean, it would make sense.
Or like it's available, the government knows it, and it can be made available if you have a good case to access someone's wages.
Right, okay.
I think that's the case. And then you get informed if anyone has accessed that information.
Okay.
But a system like that means that you can very clearly check what your colleagues are on, and then other bodies can potentially get involved to make sure that pay is distributed equally. Again, given sort of British heritage, and people really don't sort of like to talk about money, I don't know how much public support you would get for a system like that in Australia, or indeed in America, which, yeah, I don't know.
I think it would be very easy to turn people against a system like that, because if you think about it, the people who aren't going to want it are the people that are going to hold the power to, sway people's opinions through whatever means they have, media and everything like that. And once you kind of have people against something like that, then basically it's going to be over.
Maybe you could just have transparency from companies about position descriptions and the wage attached to that, and not say who is in what position, but the people would know what position they were in, and if they weren't getting paid that, they could raise that, and then if that's, there's transparency there, there's no way the company could turn around, well, I know so-and-so and so-and-so are doing the same position and they're getting paid this, but for whatever reason, we don't think that you're actually merited that.
Yeah, okay. It's a good idea. It's a very good idea.
Yeah, because then maybe that wouldn't have quite the downsides of that pure transparency, although that might be better in the long run. But you might get more support for something like that.
Speaking of kind of equality and systems of equality, this is a bit off topic, and I know we didn't prepare for it, but have you heard of the idea of a citizen income, I think it's called, where just for being a citizen of a country you get paid a certain amount of money?
Yeah, sort of like a living wage. Sort of. Yeah, I have heard of this. They've done a few experiments in certain regions of certain countries, haven't they?
They have, yeah. And it's something that kind of interests me as an idea.
I always wonder that if... I know the argument's for why this wouldn't happen, but if you have enough to live on, why would anyone actually work? And I know people say...
a very good question.
No, you want to get ahead, and even though you have the base minimum wage and you've got enough to sort of be comfortable in terms of all your basic needs, that of course people would still want more than that so that they would work. And then I go, well, okay, but would they work full-time? And they go, well, maybe not. And in that case, the GDP of the nation would drop, presumably, and then I don't know where that would sort of end up. I mean, I think in some ways it's a great thing, because I know I work a lot of hours, and I would prefer to spend more of that time doing my own things, absolutely. And maybe the 40-hour week is sort of a archaic sort of system, but I don't know what the end result, the flow-on effects of that sort of system would be.
Do you know what any of the results were from those systems that were implemented?
I think generally positive. Like people, people didn't really stop working. They just sort of considered it as sort of like extra income. But at the same time, they knew going into it that it probably wasn't going to be like a long-term thing.
Yeah.
So that would probably skew people's behavior. But they were generally happier, I think. And they felt less pressure, less stress, which is obviously healthier for the people involved. So I think generally positive.
Okay.
But I don't know how many conclusions you could draw from it. I think I'm for it, but I just really can't think through enough what the end result would be of that system.
Well, the idea behind the system is that everybody is then looked after, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of like the basic idea behind it. That everybody has what they need to survive. And there's nobody who goes without those basics.
But hypothetically, if everyone stopped working and everyone stopped paying taxes, who would be then paying the citizens the money, and where would that money come from?
Well, look, honestly, good questions. I don't think my concerns were so much with that, but with once you've kind of implemented that system, and once people are kind of working through that, why does it have to be paid in money? Because money is that thing that, it's not. If I am right, and from what I remember, it was like the idea of the system was just about making sure that everyone had what they need, and not going kind of beyond that. But why do they have to be paid in money and not other goods, which, I mean, are really what they're going to use the money to purchase, and then you can't be guaranteed what they're going to use that actual money on.
Well, that's true too, but I guess it gives the people the most flexibility in how they want to spend it.
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
Otherwise, it sort of becomes a bit more of a communist type state, right?
Well, I mean, it does, but I guess it does, doesn't it?
And I mean, communism is great in theory, but only, it seems, in theory.
Yes, unfortunately, that's the only way that communism works.
So yeah, well, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it should be implemented?
Well, look, it's difficult because you want to kind of implement that kind of system in a capitalist society where we don't really work like that. So you're trying to kind of put it in a system where you're trying to put something in a system where greed is the main motivator for people to perform. And, admittedly, as you said, greed is still going to be their motivator to work, but would you then change the whole dynamic of the society to move away from consumerism into something else? Because that's what we rely on right now, isn't it?
I mean, at a super skeptical level, I suppose, if it's only enough to live on, and then sort of the economy and the community as a whole sort of continues on in a very similar way than it does now, then it's just protecting the people that would be sort of below the poverty line, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And it would probably lead to less homelessness and probably better results in general for those people really struggling, which I think is a huge benefit. But then at the same time, we already have kind of welfare, although the welfare system has various problems. But presumably if you had that system and it was actually good, that would protect those people anyway. And then you wouldn't really need something like this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it has a huge benefit or not.
Maybe.
Everyone might just become artists. Did you look up what Parkinson's law is?
I didn't, to be honest, no.
Have you heard of the term?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so...
I've heard of Parkinson's disease.
Very different, very different. So Parkinson's law is sort of something that was conceptualized by Cyril Northcote Parkinson in a series of columns in The Economist around the 1950s. And the idea is that work expands to fill the available time. So, for example, if you say in any given week you might do an hour overtime every day in that working week, well, the amount of work that you had to do will exactly fill the amount of time that you've given yourself. Whereas if you said, no, I'm actually going to confine myself to the hours that I've been allotted and do no overtime, you'll still get that work done in the time that you've given yourself. So, and it works both ways, apparently. Not that Parkinson necessarily was looking at that. He more thought that if you give yourself more time, then work will fill that time. But it seems that people have also come to realize that if you give yourself shorter deadlines, you will stick to them and you will get the work done in that amount of time.
Okay.
I don't know what you think of that idea.
I think that really strikes a note with me, to be honest. I perform a lot better when I have a shorter deadline.
I tend to think the same, because if you have more time, I think it's sort of human nature to go, okay, well, I can take it a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Either have a little bit of a longer break or, get a bit more distracted by something, or just generally work through things a little bit slower.
Yeah.
And then you're just robbing yourself of time, though, in the long run.
Wow, okay.
Whereas you could get that work done in, it might not compress all the way. You might not be able to slash it by half. But if you say, I'm going to get this work done in an hour versus an hour and a half, it'll probably get done in an hour.
That's a fantastic law. You've been thinking a bit about work efficiency, haven't you?
Yeah. It's interesting because working at a large company like Bosch, I'm not saying that they're inefficient, but due to the many levels of the hierarchy that is in such a large company, there's lots of sort of blockers in place, and it becomes somewhat like a bureaucracy. It is a bureaucracy, and even I've been watching a little bit of Yes Minister recently, and the ways in which things can be inefficient is surprising sometimes. But if you become more aware of it, I think that's half the battle.
Okay. I mean, I would completely agree with everything you're saying there. The larger the company, the more inefficiencies there are. It's because there are so many people with their fingers in the same pie. So many kind of levels to everything that, that's something that comes up for me quite regularly.
Yeah, and I suppose at a larger level, there's not too much that you can really do about it. But I think maybe at an individual level, people can improve their efficiency for their own sake as much as maybe benefited to the company.
Yeah, definitely.
But I suppose it's kind of unfortunate that, you're mostly paid by the hour or whatever it is. And so you don't have too much incentive to do more work in less time.
Well, that's true, isn't it?
It's not like, you have this much work to do, and if you get that done in a week, that's fantastic. It's, you have to work 40 hours this week.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you happen to get done in that time, which could be nothing.
I mean, that's where the managers come in and the people that sit there and crack the whips for that exact reason.
Yeah, but it's not so sort of self-incentivized.
No, it's not.
So that's why you have to have the managers be there, managing and cracking the whip, like you say.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is the case. It's not an efficient way to run the world.
Yeah, I don't think so. Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes with more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/22. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you might think also, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
So, Alex, I mentioned briefly a couple of weeks ago now that SpaceX were doing some testing on their Falcon rockets.
Oh, yes. It's exciting stuff.
And it seems they've completed testing on the first stage of their Falcon Heavy rockets. Not the Falcon 9, but the Heavy.
Yes, which seems to have been successful.
Yeah.
They, in an article that we saw, they've posted a pretty cool video of the, the main thruster, do they call it? Of the rocket firing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool,
and, sending a huge burst of flame and probably atmosphere destroying stuff into the into the.
Yes, but it's all right. Elon's countering that all with the Tesla program.
Good. It is fortunate, isn't it?
Yes, that's why it can burn so much rocket fuel.
Yep. So, yeah, it's all pretty cool stuff. I for one, am pretty excited to see what happens.
So,
whether it's a success.
What do they plan to use this Falcon Heavy for? Is this the one that does the supply runs?
I think it's to take cargo into space, from my understanding. Although, what exactly the cargo will be, I'm not entirely sure.
Up to the space station, probably.
Possibly, yeah.
Because I know they do a lot of runs up there. Well, relatively a lot. And they've taken over a lot of that from NASA.
Oh, okay. All right.
Restocking the space station, yeah.
And, of course, the exciting thing about these is they'll be reusable. So they will be able to be landed back on Earth.
Yeah, have you seen footage of some of SpaceX's rockets coming back down and landing themselves?
I have, yeah. They land them on pads or something.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the rocket coming down, sort of facing, I guess, the wrong direction for a rocket in terms of travel.
Yes.
And just landing so nicely. They've done good work there.